Hi, welcome to Ladies Leading. I'm your host, Jessica Gendron. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I believe in the world today there are too many stories of female leaders left untold. It has become my personal mission to give those stories a microphone. Ladies Leading intends to share the real stories of female leaders on their journeys to and through leadership, so that we might gain precious insight and advice from leaders just like them. We're giving women the microphone. Welcome to Ladies Leading. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Ladies Leading. I have our guest today. Her name is Erin Windler, and I'm so excited for you to hear about Erin and her journey to where she is today. True story, Erin is my neighbor, and I think she's like one of the coolest people ever. And when we started this series, she was one of the first people I asked, and it's taken me about 12 months to nail her down. So here she is finally to talk with us today. And so I'm excited for you all to hear her story. Erin, would you start by telling everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start off with I apologize for the 12 months. Um, I think, that's a part of me that I think will come out in this interview, is that I'm pretty aware of imposter syndrome and when I'm having it. And, Brittany sent me the email and talking to you, and I was like, I'm really not that cool or that interesting. So, not really sure why Jess would want to talk to me. But I think, I recognized that and kind of thought through it and said, okay, I'm willing to share my story. And I think there may be some tidbits that someone can take away from it. So,
Mhm.
so with that, yeah, I'll get into kind of my journey and telling you about myself. Um, so growing up, I played basketball competitively. And I would say, the girls that I played with are still some of my best friends. Um, One snippet from that, my coach always said, no deposit, no return. And that's a nugget that I've taken with me, ever since I was, probably 10 when I heard that. That's always in the back of my mind. I've got to put in the hard work if I want to see any success. So played basketball growing up. My parents always said that I could either go to Notre Dame or play basketball somewhere academically equal to Notre Dame. So my choices were pretty limited. Um, but West Point started recruiting me, and then went out and went on a visit and just, I was inspired, in awe, fell in love with the campus, the people, the mission, everything that West Point stood for, to the point where my parents were at the beginning saying, "You're not going, you're not going." And we walked off campus and they said, "This is the place for you."
Mm.
So I went to West Point for college. After graduation, entered the Army. I was an engineer officer. Thought that that would be my career path. Obviously, there were other plans, and I had to medically transition from the Army. And at that point, I had to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I think that's a question everyone has to deal with.
Yeah.
Mine came a lot sooner than I was expecting. So, I think I went the traditional route, working with a military recruiter, found a job that was kind of in line with my major, and started working at Nestle Waters North America in operations and engineering. Um, I got married right around my transition time. So there were a lot of changes at once. I
Hmm.
don't think I realized that at the time, but looking back now, I'm like, wow, why did I do that to myself? Um, and then both my husband and I are from the Indiana area. So we decided, I think it was a little less than a year in the new job and stuff kind of started going on with family at home and grandparents needing help. So we decided to move back to Indy. And shortly after that, I got to meet my awesome neighbor, Jess. Um, and I was still working at Nestle. And I know this sounds dumb, but while I was there, I really learned that business runs business. And I think that was my first time in a business environment. and not so much in the army or in operations and engineering world. And I knew that I didn't really know much about business because I hadn't been in that environment. So I knew I had to go back and get my MBA. So I started searching for schools. One of the schools that popped out to me was Purdue Cranert, with their mission of developing global business leaders. So, thought that's the right fit for me. Started the weekend MBA program there. My husband loved having me locked up in the office from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then 9 p.m. on,
Mhm.
but learned a ton through my MBA. And while I was doing that, the opportunity to go work at Allison Transmission presented itself. And I've been there for almost 3 years now. Um, it's a role that aligns much more with the business aspect of what I was trying to do. And then I think importantly, it's in the defense space. And as I was away from the Army working at Nestle, I realized how much I missed that defense world. So it was very important to me to have the opportunity to go back closer to that world and to also be able to support the war fighters and many of my friends who were still in the Army.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think there's so many pieces of your journey, Erin, that I think a lot of women can learn a lot from. I want to go back to, you said something about when you were first at Nestle that you said, oh, businesses are work with business, or however you said that. Will you say that to me again? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, I said business runs business.
Business runs business. Yeah, will you tell me a little bit, will you talk a little bit more about, like, what was it that popped out to you that was different, and what did you start to realize about those exchanges and those encounters that made you realize some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think as simple as it sounds now, being in the business world, having a budget and sticking to that budget, and learning how to forecast that budget and working cross functionally and working with stakeholders. And okay, if I go over my budget, how does this impact you? What reports go up through the chain of command? How does that make our factory look? How does that impact our performance then? Um, so I think that's probably the biggest dollars and cents aha moment that I had. And then, just trying to tie projects together with that budget to make sure that we were still meeting our goals.
Mhm.
And that was really the first time that I had looked closely at a budget and tried to understand its bigger impact.
Yeah. So much of that, I think, is stuff that women don't get to see in the workplace very early on in our careers, but it's some of the stuff that's pretty critical to that sort of climb in the corporate ladder of understanding how all of that stuff works. So let's talk about the big elephant, though. You went to West Point. It's predominantly male. You were in the military. It's not. I mean, it's predominantly male, but not by to a vast extent. Um, you're an engineer, which is a male-dominated industry. Talk about what it's been like for you in all of those male spaces, being a female, being a female leader, being a female athlete. What have those experiences been like for you?
Yeah, so I think, um, I've never tried to look at myself differently for being a female.
Yeah.
Um, I've always tried to hold myself to the same standard as everyone else. In school, tried to maintain good grades to be academically competitive. Um, Obviously, playing a sport, I was surrounded by other very strong women,
Mhm.
which I think was extremely supportive, and kind of helped to set that bar and not necessarily realize that you are different as a woman.
Mm.
Um, I think engineering and in the military, it's just going out there and performing, doing your best, and not trying to make excuses or say, well, the standard is different because I am a woman.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. A lot of women that we've talked to in this series have said a lot of similar things to you of If you look for something to bother you, it'll bother you. But if you just they sort of have this like, maybe we're oblivious, maybe we ignore it, or maybe we just got really good at letting it roll off our shoulders, but we just don't acknowledge it in a lot of regards. And I think that that's true based on what you're telling me. Let's talk
Right.
about
And
um
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think, that kind of goes back to the no deposit, no return piece of it too,
Yeah.
right? I think whenever you're willing to put in the dedication and learn and hone your skill craft, um, you hold yourself to the same standard that that is universally accepted and expected.
Mhm. Yeah, and for those of you watching at home, you should know that Erin is one of the hardest workers I've ever met in my whole entire life. I mean, when she was working at Nestle, she was working crazy hours. She was driving crazy far to work there, and she was it was always something I noticed. And then, to get your master's degree on the week, your MBA on the weekend while you were also working. I only knew how much you were gone because your husband was lonely, and we would often adopt him, and so um, I just you are one of the hardest workers that I've ever seen, and I think that that no deposit, no return makes so much sense of
Mhm.
just who you are. Let's talk about big lessons throughout your career. Like I think a lot of us have these moments for us that are like, oh, I learned that here, or this was a big lesson for me. What have some of those things been for you?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I don't know that I've ever had like that aha moment that people talk about. I think I've learned a lot along the way on my journey.
Mhm.
And each different step has taught me a lot about myself. So personally, my dad passed away my junior year of college.
Mm.
And, shortly after his funeral, thank God I had friends who came home with me, and then flew back to West Point with me. Because had they not, I don't know that I would have gone back, to be honest with you.
Mm.
But I think I learned a lot about my grit and taking a lot of my dad's lessons with me, working hard. Um, a big one was enjoying what you do,
Mhm.
and then also caring for everyone around you. So never being too busy to say hi to the CEO, the battalion commander, or the janitor. Levels don't matter, and everyone deserves respect and to say hi. So I think not an aha moment, but I started to shape who I wanted to be as a very scary adult person. Um, and then I think my time in the army, um, I really enjoyed being an engineer. So I think I learned that I liked that piece of it. I liked the leadership piece and project management. Um, and then at Nestle, I think the big moment was, one, figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. Two, realizing that I missed the defense space. And three, learning, like I said, that business runs business.
Mhm.
And now at Allison, I think I learn more about business every single day. And I learn, that I'm passionate about supporting the defense world. So I think to tie it up, yeah, I've never had that big critical moment where I said, I finally get it now. But I think, you
I
know,
don't think any of us finally get it. I don't
if
think that
someone
happens.
did, that would be amazing, and I would love to hear about it. But I think each step along my journey has been another step in self discovery and getting me closer to what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, where did you like that self-awareness piece and that constant reflection? Like where did you learn to do that? Or is that just something that you've innately done, or and is that something you formally do, like through a journal, or are you just sort of passively doing it?
Yeah, so I will tell you, I tried to journal before, and that was one of the hardest things that I have done before in my life, just with how honest you have to be with yourself.
Mhm.
I think that was hunting the good stuff. So it was like 3 positive things from your day, which doesn't sound difficult, but by day 7, I was like, "I can't do this anymore." Um, but I think the self-awareness, honestly, it goes back to basketball from a very young age.
Yeah.
Being competitive, we all were pushed to be extremely honest with each other, to the point where, that there were a lot of disagreements, but we learned to keep everything on the court, and
Mhm.
off the court, we were the best of friends. But it really caused me, I think, to reflect, hey, did I handle that situation right? Did I take those comments right? What can I do to be a better teammate? How can I be a better leader? And then my dad was a volunteer coach, so he kind of got to see all of that.
Mm.
And it was awesome to be able to talk to him after those different experiences. Dad, what'd you think? How could we have done better as a team? How could I have handled this situation better? And just, never being okay with the status quo, always trying to make myself better.
Yeah. I love that. I think having that connection to sports too, and just knowing that that's been sort of the foundational stuff for some of those lessons that you learned early on. That's pretty cool. It's a good testament to sports.
Right.
Um, okay, so let's talk about leadership for you. Like, what does leadership look like for you in
Yeah.
your?
So leadership to me, I think is there are two critical aspects of it. I think one, it's being a servant leader,
Mm.
and two, being an authentic leader. I think early on, I tried to fit a certain mold or personality as a leader, and learned that that just exhausted me.
Mm.
And I was spending more time trying to be someone that I'm not than just trying to be myself and being a good leader. And along the way, I've learned that if I'm myself and a leader, I can spend that extra effort that I would have been trying to be someone else on being a leader and taking care of my team.
Mhm.
And I think the servant leadership piece of it, is being willing to work with everyone on the team, understand what they do, understand how the team can help them, and what they need from the team to be successful, so that at the end of the day, the team can reach its goals and accomplish the mission.
Love that. I love that. What do you think? I'm curious about your military experience. You're my first official military person to be on the show, and so, I'm curious about, there's such a rich tradition of leadership in the military, and really important lessons that you learn along your journey through the military. And I'm curious, what are some of the big takeaways for you from your experience in the military that you think maybe have shaped you as a leader and as a female?
Yeah, so I think, um, it's focusing on the mission, making sure that you accomplish the mission, um, and then taking care of your people, right? If you don't take care of your people, you have no one who can help you achieve that mission or that objective.
Mm.
And then I think it's, really understanding what that mission is or what that goal is, and not having tunnel vision on one way to achieve that goal. Roadblocks are going to happen, curveballs are going to get thrown, and it's kind of, how do you use the tools in your tool bag and react to those changes to still stay on somewhat of a course to reach your goal.
Yeah, I love that. What advice would you give to other women who maybe are like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Or maybe females in engineering, or even women thinking about getting an MBA, or, women in male dominated industries, anything.
Yeah.
Is there
Yeah.
advice you would give?
Yeah. So one, I don't think you ever know what you want to be when you grow up.
Those
I
are the truest words that have ever been spoken on this video cast ever.
Authentic leadership right
I
there.
mean,
But no, I think you figure it out as you go. I think that as long as you're open to different ideas
mm,
and you're able to take the time to have some self-reflection and be self-aware, and then honest about, this may not be working for me, or I really love to do this, and following that, and then being aware of your weaknesses, and is it something that you're okay with it remaining a weakness, or is it something that you think you need to put the time and effort into making it a strength?
mm.
And then I think probably most important skill would be learning how to learn quickly.
Oh,
And I think, if you can learn how to learn quickly, you don't need to know all of the answers, but you're able to learn how to get to all of the answers. And I think that makes you a very versatile or dynamic person. You can take on any new role, job, function, XYZ, etc., put it in there, and you can figure it out and learn how to do it.
okay. So this is a unique response to this question of, what's the skill or trait? I learning how to learn quickly. I love that. Um, and that's not something I've necessarily we haven't heard a ton of. How do you do that? Like, how do you get better at that? If I'm someone that wants to learn how to learn quickly, that did I say that right?
There you go.
What are some things that they can do to flex that muscle more, or to,
Yeah.
work it out at
Um,
least?
I think it's being inquisitive. I
Mm.
think it's asking, not being afraid to go in and say, hey, so and so, I have 10 questions. They're probably going to be really dumb, but I'm trying to learn this. So can you walk me through it? And I would say 9 times out of 10, someone is going to say yes, because at the end of the day, people like sharing what they know. So I think it's having that dialogue with the experts, really understanding what the key questions are to ask to help you grasp the concept quicker. And then it's doing research on your own. So if they point you to different links, or you're Googling or using a company network or whatever, and there's just a domain of information on the topic that you're interested in, it's taking the time to read it and kind of learn up on your own.
Yeah. I think it goes back to one of the first things that you said, no deposit, no return.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
I love that. There's just like this consistency to everything you say, Erin. I love it. Yeah. What other advice would you give, you know, for women? I think a lot about, particularly women, young women who, eh, for everybody that's watching, newsflash, Erin's not very old. She's had a very cool career. She doesn't look old. You don't look old. But she's had this very cool career in a very short amount of time. And what's the key to that? Like what do you think has contributed to your ability to be where you are today as quickly as you've gotten there in your career?
Yeah, so I think absolutely learning how to learn quickly. Um, and I think, you know, it's something that I've had to learn along the way, because if you ask my mom growing up, she would tell you I had no emotional intelligence. So I've tried to develop that as I've gotten a little bit older. And with that, I would say, one of the critical lessons that I've learned is your success, not even your success, just who you are as a person, and how you carry yourself. And then I guess your success is really based on the relationships that you build in your support network. So it's having those genuine relationships with people. It's not having a relationship with someone so that you can get something out of it and learn something out of it, and then just walk away from that relationship. Because I think the relationships are circular, right? You build trust with people by doing a good job, by working hard, by helping them out. And then at the end of 10 years down the road, you can go back and reach out for advice, right? And I think that's really important. Known you for so long and seen you progress, and they can say, hey, you remember this one time 7 years ago when you did this one thing? What did you learn from it? And aren't you kind of in a similar situation now? um, and I think that's both personally and professionally, right? Because another thing that I'm learning is that life is about balance.
Mm.
And if there's personally something going on, it will probably affect you professionally and vice versa. So if you have those relationships, both personal and professional, I think you can help balance yourself out on both ends of the spectrum. And then, how we talked about the self awareness, it's having those great relationships with people to go back and replay situations and say, hey, I think I screwed up here. What should I have done?
Mm.
Or as we were talking, I don't know, whenever ago, hey, I think I'm having imposter syndrome in this situation. Can you talk me through it? And just, having that relationship to be able to have that open, honest, and comfortable dialogue.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think it was last week we talked, and you, at the end of our conversation, you're like, "So what you're saying is I'm having imposter syndrome right now." And I said, "Yeah, I
Yep.
think that's what I'm saying."
And what's interesting about that is I had the discussion with my husband a few months ago, and he was saying, "Well, I don't know about this," and I said, "You are having imposter syndrome right now." And he goes, "What's that?" And the fact that I even had to explain that to him, I was like, "What world do you live in where I have to explain that to you?"
He lives in a boy
Which
world.
was a little eye opening for me, right? But I explained it to him, and he didn't want to admit it right then. But a week later, he was like, I think I was having imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So I thought that was a victory that I got him to think about it for a week. Yeah.
And that he admitted it.
And that he admitted it because we all know him and he does not like to admit things like that.
Success. That's awesome. Okay. So you skipped ahead on me, but I'm not mad at you about it. And you said I usually end with one skill or trait. And you said learning how to learn quickly. If you had to pick one other one, what would it be? Put you on the spot.
That's a tough question.
Hmm.
Um, no, I'll go back to no deposit, no return, right? And hard work, determination, discipline, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. You
Um,
called it grit earlier too. I love that.
grit, maybe even patience, which is kind of the opposite, but success doesn't happen overnight. And if success does happen to you overnight, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, right?
So that's where the patience comes in, right? But it, I don't think that success should be expected, right? If I go out on a basketball court now and shoot free throws, there's no way that I would hit 10 out of 10. I may hit 2 out of 10. When I was shooting hundreds of shots a day and shooting hundreds of basketballs a day, I should have been 10 out of 10 from the free throw line. And if I wasn't, I should have expected that from myself. Um, and maybe I started at 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 and through weeks of practice worked up to that 10 out of 10. So I think it's the testament of hard work, discipline, staying the course, and then patience.
Mhm. Yeah, there's this great book that I think speaks to what you just said really beautifully. It's called Talent is Overrated. And they look at this idea of natural, innate, God given ability, or if there's another reason why people are successful. And, what they found is that it's deliberate practice,
But
intentionally focusing in on the places where you have weakness and continuing to hone those skills repeatedly. And they point to a lot of professional athletes and how they become really good at their sport is through consistency and practice and just this idea of no deposit, no returns. And so
right,
I love that we ended on that, Erin,
yeah,
because that's where we started and that's where we ended. And I think it's such a good, I think it's such a good piece of advice, I think, for people to think about. I think, in today's world, the social media stuff, we just see the glamorous end result.
mhm,
And we think that it's really easy to get where those people are. And the reality is that it's just not. It's lots of hard
right.
work.
Yep, exactly. I wish that there was instant success, but I think, at the end of the day, once you've put in the time and the hard work and then finally see that success, I don't know that I would say success is sweeter that way. Um, but you have to know the bad times to truly enjoy the good times.
I love that. And I'm going to stop us there because that was a perfect way to end. So, Erin, thank you for being here and finally letting me interview you for this show. You were such a great guest. Thank you, everyone at home, for watching. Make sure you check out ladies-leading.com where you can see past episodes and nominate a woman to be on our show. Thank you to our sponsor, the Center for Leadership Excellence, who's working to make workplaces great places for everyone to work. And we'll see you next time as we pass the microphone to another female leader. Thanks, everyone. So there's a couple of really great things that I want to make sure that you all see and hear from Erin's episode that are pretty important. She started the episode by talking about no deposit, no return. And I think that that's such an important part of her story, this idea of hard work, of grit, of perseverance, of, really never being satisfied with the status quo. And I think in so many of the female leaders that we talked to, hard work was present in their story, but it wasn't necessarily in the forefront the way it was for Erin. And I think she so beautifully illustrated and put a spotlight on hard work and how it relates to female leadership. She talked about it in a lot of different places in her interview where she talked about, success doesn't happen overnight and success shouldn't be expected. And you can't be okay with the status quo. You have to work hard. You have to put in hard work to see success. And it was woven through sort of everything that she talked about: her career, her sports, her MBA program, her life, the lessons that she learned, how she holds herself. And I think that that was such an important piece of her journey and why she's been able to be so wildly successful so quickly in her career. Some of that, I think, comes from innately who Erin is. Some of that came from the way she was raised. Some of that came maybe from the military. But I think a lot of it came from the female experience in leadership and in male dominated spaces. When I asked Erin about, being a female in a lot of really male dominated spaces, she said, I never tried to look at myself differently being a female. I hold myself to the same standard as everyone else. And then she went on to say, you can't make excuses that the standard is different because I'm a woman. And I want to honor that because I think that that is the mindset of so many of the female leaders that we talk to when we ask them about, what was it like being in male dominated spaces? They really talk about like, oh, I never really even thought about it, or I never really noticed, or I didn't let it bother me, or I let that stuff roll off my back, or things like that. And I think that's important to say. But at the same time, I think um maybe it's because we as women don't really realize how much harder we have to work in comparison to maybe our male counterparts. There's a mountain of data that suggests that the expectation for women in the workplace, particularly women in leadership, is higher than maybe our male counterparts. and that we do have to overcome more difficult and more obstacles on our path to leadership and in leadership than maybe our male counterparts. And that we have to hustle a lot harder than maybe some of our male counterparts. And I don't think that we as women even really recognize it. I think we just work hard to get the job done. And I think if the expectations were equal, we probably wouldn't be lazier. We probably would just get further. And so I want to point to what Erin said because it mirrors so much of what we heard from other women. But I also think, as so many of these women we talked to talked about hard work, and particularly Erin talking about hard work, I think that we are hard workers. We hustle hard as female leaders, but I think that the expectation is different for us as women, and we probably would get a lot farther a lot faster given the work ethic that we have. But it's such an important and beautiful part about our story. And for some of you who have been following, one of the things that we do after every episode for our female leaders is we give them a bracelet with a sort of mantra on it based on their episode, a word or a phrase that sort of popped out to us based on things that they said or parts of their journey. And the word we chose for Erin was grit, because I think grit really encompasses passion and perseverance and hard work. And, Erin said grit a couple times in the episode, but I think it really encompasses who she is as a leader and as a female. The other piece of Erin's journey that may have gotten missed and was buried underneath the hard work conversation was just sort of this really important level of self-awareness and the ability to do introspection really, really well. She talked about it in the context of hard work a lot, but she also talked about a lot of awareness around specifically imposter syndrome. And I thought that that piece of it was so important because I think as women, we have a lot of imposter syndrome. She told the story of her husband, Adam, who didn't even really know what imposter syndrome was. And in fact, most guys don't, but it's very much a part of the vernacular for so many of us female leaders. And, that awareness to the fact that we have imposter syndrome and to be able to name it when we experience it and move forward from it, I think was really cool to hear Erin talk about. If you ever wanted a testament to putting your children into sports, I think Erin's experience and her story is a really important testament to that. Talking about being in competitive sports at a young age and talking about having to be really extremely honest with one another and extremely honest with yourself, I think really built these habits of good introspection for her and great self-awareness. And I've been thinking a lot about that comment ever since I talked to her about, why are women not great at introspection, and why are women not great at being honest with each other in the workplace? We tend to sugarcoat things or be afraid of hurting people's feelings in a lot of regards. And I think a lot about, while men are in competitive sports pretty much all the time as kids, whereas girls maybe sometimes are and sometimes aren't. When I was a little kid, I got put in Girl Scouts and gymnastics and dance. And so competition I didn't really get healthy ideas about competition until later in my life. And I wonder if maybe that's part of the problem. I wish we could replicate the level of honesty and feedback that we're willing to give each other in sports as a team, where it comes from care and trust and respect as I'm going to help you be better. And because I want to help you be better, I'm giving you this feedback because I care about you and I care about our team. I wish we could plant that into the business world more readily. And I really felt like Erin talked about that and talked about this level of self-awareness, and it was really important, and wanted to point to that too to make sure you didn't miss it. And put your kids in sports because clearly it helps them be better leaders. So um, I had so much fun talking to Erin. This actually concludes season 2 of Ladies Leading. I want to thank Erin for being on the show. I want to thank her for her service to our country and all of our servicemen and women for their service. But also want to thank you all for sticking with us for 2 seasons. Also, if you haven't seen we've started to build female leadership competencies based on the things that we've heard from our female leaders. And those are also on our website. So make sure to go to ladies-leading.com where you can see past episodes. You can nominate a woman to be on our show. And you can also see the leadership competencies that we'll be unveiling to you over the course of the next 7 weeks. Thank you all for joining us. I want to thank our sponsor, the Center for Leadership Excellence. You can learn more at cleindy.com. And we'll see you next season as we pass the microphone to another group of amazing female leaders.